Imagine being ripped from your family at the age of 3 and raised in the bosom of your nation's mortal enemy, only to become one of their most promising military leaders, and then to turn your back on them and lead your own people in a titanic struggle that would defeat and humiliate your former captors. This is the life's trajectory of the greatest military leader you've never heard of, Skanderbeg, the man who single-handedly prevented the Ottoman Empire from devouring Europe for a quarter of a century. Skanderbeg was not a name but a title. It's a corruption of the Turkish word for Lord Alexander, an appellation which his Ottoman captors gave him as a comparison of his military ability with that of Alexander the Great. His birth name was Gjergj Kastrioti, and he was born in 1405 in a small Albanian village. At that time, Albania was being systematically conquered by the Turkish Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans pursued a policy of Islamisation toward the Christian Albanians, building mosques and forcing the local people to convert. One of the methods used by the Turks to both indoctrinate the Albanians and force compliance was to seize the children of prominent citizens and then have them raised in the Ottoman court. The Kastriotis were a noble Albanian family who ruled over the Principality of Kastrioti. In 1409, young Gjergj and his brother Stanisha were taken from his parents, Gjergj and Voisava, to be raised in the Devsirme system, by which foreign children were educated in Islam and taught to be military officers. Rather than being treated harshly, the indoctrinated children were given the best treatment and the finest instruction, but they were also forced to forget everything about their previous lives as Christian Albanians and to give their undying loyalty to the Turkish overlord, who at the time was Sultan Murad the Second. Gjergj flourished under Ottoman military tutelage. By his mid-teens, he had developed into a powerful and skilled fighter with a mind that was destined for leadership. He quickly advanced through the military ranks. From 1423 onwards, he fought for the Ottomans on the field of battle as they blazed their way through Asia Minor and Eastern Europe. His skill as a war leader quickly became evident, giving rise to the nickname Skanderbeg. By the time he was in his mid-20s, Skanderbeg's reputation as a fierce leader of Turkish forces had become international. Back in Albania, his father was compelled to apologize to the royal authorities in Venice for his son's actions against Christians. By now, John had made the decision to abandon all allegiances with the Ottomans and throw in his lot with Venice. He attached himself to an uprising against the Ottomans. The revolt proved to be a dismal failure. It resulted in the seizure of all Kastrioti lands and John being exiled to Greece, where he was to die in poverty. Skanderbeg's stellar military reputation prevented him from any direct punishment for his father's rebellious actions. However, the confiscation of land included territory that belonged to him. When he appealed for it to be returned to him, his request was flatly denied. This was a decision that the Ottomans would come to regret. By 1443, Skanderbeg's allegiance to the Ottomans was becoming severely strained. The rebellion of his family meant that he no longer had to remain loyal in order to protect them. He was also still smarting at the confiscation of the land that was his birthright. Following a crushing defeat by the Crusaders under Hungarian leader John Hunyadi, he deserted from the Turkish army and made his way to his Albanian homeland. He had resolved to make full use of the military training and experience he had gained under the Ottomans and use it against them to fight for the freedom of his native people. Skanderbeg entered Albania with a small force of 300 native Albanians who had also deserted. He also had in his possession a forged letter of recommendation from the Sultan to the governor of the town of Cluj in north-central Albania, which he used to exert authority in the guise of still being loyal to the Turks. This allowed him to gain control of the town and establish its castle as his base. On the night of November the 28th, Skanderbeg had his army put to death all of the Turkish guards in Cluj. He then proclaimed that the town was free of the Ottoman yoke and planted his distinctive flag, a black double-headed eagle, above the castle. He next set about liberating nearby towns. For decades, the Albanian people had been chafing under Turkish oppression. All they needed was a dynamic leader to rally them in opposition against the Ottomans. Now, finally in the form of Skanderbeg, they had found that leader. Men from all over Albania flocked to bolster the rebel force. Skanderbeg was named Commander-in-Chief of the Albanian army. Within months, he had grown that army to around 15,000 troops. However, he knew he needed more than that to withstand the might of the Ottoman fury which is about to be unleashed upon him. As a result, he sent envoys throughout Europe in order to build much-needed alliances. For his part, Sultan Murad was enraged at the traitorous actions of Skanderbeg. He immediately amassed a huge force to invade north-central Albania to wipe out the rebel army. The inevitable clash occurred on June the 29th, 1444, on the plain of Torviol in the lower Dibru region of eastern Albania. The Ottoman army was led by General Ali Pasha, who commanded around 25,000 men. Against this force, Skanderbeg had some 7,000 infantry. Yet a combination of guerrilla fighting tactics and his more advanced knowledge of the battlefield terrain gave him a stunning victory. Around 8,000 Ottomans were killed and another 2,000 being taken prisoner. This first great victory stunned everyone. No previous army had been able to withstand the might of the Ottomans. As a result, the name of Skanderbeg echoed through the royal chambers of Europe. Meanwhile, an enraged sultan sent a second army to do the job that the first could not. On October the 10th, this army, under the command of Firuz Pasha, attempted to block Skanderbeg's entry into Macedonia. But the Albanian general outwitted his former ally by luring him into a valley and then attacking from all sides with a hidden force of 3,500 men. Even though this was less than a quarter of the size of Pasha's army, Skanderbeg achieved this second great victory, slaughtering 1,500 of the enemy, including Pasha himself. In 1446, Skanderbeg's army twice more defeated the Ottomans. The growing tally of victories made it easier for him to garner international support. Much-needed financial support was provided by the Venetians, the Italians, and even Pope Calixtus III, all of who viewed the Albanian general as the last bulwark to hold back Ottoman advancement into Europe. Through his diplomatic skill, Skanderbeg was able to unite the traditionally disparate princes in his own land to give him their almost universal support. By mid-1447, Skanderbeg's power and prestige had become so great that the Venetians came to see him as a threat. Worried that he would invade Venice and attempt to incorporate it into Albania, they declared war on Albania. For the next 2 years, Skanderbeg was therefore forced to fight on two fronts. Yet his military genius and diplomatic nous brought him victory after victory. On July the 23rd, Skanderbeg achieved a stunning victory of the Venetians at the Drin River, despite being outnumbered 2-1. This knocked the stuffing out of the Venetians, forcing them to come to peace terms. The Albanian army was once again able to give their full attention to the Ottomans. Over a period of a quarter of a century, Skanderbeg met and defeated the Ottomans on 24 occasions. Incredibly, his forces were outmanned on every occasion, yet, through his brilliance of generalship and his reliance on guerrilla fighting tactics, he was able to humiliate the Turks time after time. The greatest victory occurred at the Battle of Cluj in 1450. The town and its castles was besieged by a massive Ottoman army that is said to have numbered more than 100,000 men. It was led by Sultan Murad himself. Skanderbeg left just 1,500 men to defend the castle, and then set out with the remainder of his men to harass the Sultan's supply caravans and conduct lightning raids on the flanks of the Ottoman army. After 4 months of these constant attacks, the Ottoman army, having failed to make their way into Cluj, were in a state of chaos. More than 20,000 Turkish soldiers had died from a combination of starvation and enemy attack. Finally, the Sultan had had enough, and he called off the siege. After several years of relative peace, the Ottomans returned, this time under the leadership of new Sultan Murad the Second. But once again, the Albanian army came off victorious. For the next 15 years, Skanderbeg waged war, not only in Albania but all across Europe. He was feared and revered in every land as the man who had saved Europe from Islamic domination. He was finally defeated, not by any man, but by the disease of malaria. His death in 1468 at the age of 62 was mourned throughout all of Europe. Today, he is recognised in Albania as the greatest that they ever produced, and his standard, the black double-headed eagle, has been adopted as the official flag of the country he so brilliantly defended. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time on History Junkie.